Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, May 29. I'm Herman Green with the Midday News. Special welcome if you're watching online at onespotmedia.com. Former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson has paid tribute to Edward Seaga, who passed away on Tuesday, his 89th birthday. In his tribute, Mr. Patterson, who retired from active politics in 2006, made note of Mr. Seaga's leadership, emphasizing that Mr. Seaga leaves behind an indelible impact on the political evolution of Jamaica and its social and economic development.
In pursuit of his huge and varied portfolio responsibilities, he was entrusted with the task of completing the matrix of institutional building that was essential for the modern nation-state. He set out to preserve and promote our rich cultural legacy while spawning new modules far and wide for our island's development. Edward Seaga, to the very end, was blessed with the mental acuity to maintain his attention span for sports, music, and the learning process which had influenced the path of his earlier life.
And regional leaders have also been sending tributes and comments on the passing of former Prime Minister Edward Seaga. Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, says the Caribbean region has lost a visionary leader.
Mr. Seaga's career reflects a man that appreciated the critical importance of the development of institutions and infrastructure, especially as you set out to build a new nation. He will forever be remembered for this clear commitment to building these institutions and infrastructure, not just in Jamaica, but across the entire Caribbean.
Noted educator, RGR and TVJ commentator, and Gleaner columnist Martin Henry is dead. He was pronounced dead at the Medical Associates Hospital last night. It was a moment of shock for many, as just minutes before his passing, Mr. Henry was on TVJ's primetime news speaking about the contribution of former Prime Minister Edward Seaga. In a tweet last night, Prime Minister Andrew Holness said, Mr. Henry, who was the academic manager at the University of Technology, made a significant contribution to the education system, as well as being a strong advocate for transparency and good governance. Mr. Henry was a regular panelist on RGR's Sunday News Review program, That's a Wrap, starting with the first edition of the show in August 2008. Here's Mr. Henry in his last interview speaking about Mr. Seaga's contribution to nation building.
A great and distinguished Jamaican has gone to join the ancestors, and in true Seaga style, he has timed it for his birthday.
Yes.
In terms of his great and outstanding contributions, there is a long list from which we could draw, but in an interview which I heard this afternoon, Mr. Seaga described his greatest contribution as turning back the forces of democratic socialism in the 1980 election, which many Jamaicans thought would be taking the country in the wrong direction. I am not in a position to dispute with Mr. Seaga, but I'd also like to underscore his work with the formation of the Electoral Advisory Commission as a significant contribution to the political stability of Jamaica.
Mr. Henry was also a founding director and former chairman of the anti-corruption agency National Integrity Action, NIA. The NIA says over the last 7 years, Mr. Henry added considerable value to the policy direction and to NIA's contribution to combat corruption, as well as to the advocacy of good governance in Jamaica. And for political analyst Kevin O'Brien Chang,
when Martin spoke, I knew he was giving his own truth. Nobody else is. No agendas, speaking for anyone else. A man I had the utmost respect for. An honest, good man of integrity. He will be sorely missed. I said, it's a shocker to everyone, a shocker to me. The man I used to talk with regularly. I had so much respect for him.
2 men are in custody following a foiled robbery attempt in the Spalding Market in Clarendon. The names of the men have not yet been disclosed. Reports are that the men tried to rob a woman of her car keys and purse at gunpoint. It's not clear how the police were alerted, but the men were arrested after they were chased by the lawmen. A firearm was seized in the process. And here now is a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In the next edition of the Health Report, we look at the impact of motor vehicle crashes on the health sector.
I know, based on some of other reports, that in the North Coast, since the highways have opened up, the percentage of injuries and the severity of the injuries have gone up. Obviously, with better roads, people feel that
when is it gone up, like what percentage of figures?
That I can't tell you off the top of my head.
That's the Health Report this evening in Primetime News. And you know, for today's Healthy Living tip, obtain the best medical care, get plenty of rest, and listen to your doctor's recommendations.
And with that, we take a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. We'll have more stories right after these messages. Welcome back, continuing the news. Millions will be spent this financial year to improve a number of the country's markets. The announcement was made by local government minister Desmond McKenzie while giving his sectoral debate presentation in Parliament on Tuesday. TVJ's O'Shane Masters tells us more.
For some time, vendors have been complaining about the deteriorating infrastructure of some of the country's market facilities. Among the concerns, leaking roofs. But speaking at Tuesday's sectoral debate presentation, local government minister Desmond McKenzie pointed to a number of infrastructure developments which will be taking place this fiscal year. Among them, the establishment of a new market in Port Maria, St. Mary. He says the expectation is that works on that market will be completed in July. As for other markets,
we are presently working on the Papine market, and then we'll be focusing our attention on the Stone Hill market, Mr. Speaker. And as I gave a commitment last year, the Hopewell market, Mr. Speaker, we now have the funds in an MP, and I will be making some announcements shortly on the Hopewell market, Mr. Speaker.
The Hopewell market will undergo rehabilitation works at a cost of $20 million. Mr. McKenzie also highlighted plans for a market in Negril.
Following consultations with the Negril Chamber of Commerce, residents and stakeholders in Negril, the technical team of the ministry has completed the design for a brand new market to be built in Negril at a cost of $70 million, and that work will commence later on this year, Mr. Speaker.
In St. Elizabeth, Mr. McKenzie said work at the Black River Market has been completed. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
Meanwhile, Mr. McKenzie says improvements are being made to fire stations across the island. He gave an update on that in his presentation yesterday.
We renovated the one in Kingston. Yes. We put in fire boats. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I had a discussion with a member of the brigade, and you know what he said to me? That he's in the brigade for over 20 years. And in the time that he has been in the brigade, he has never witnessed this before. For the first time in decades, Mr. Speaker, we are building 5 brand new fire stations. Never before, Mr. Speaker.
He says in addition to building new fire stations, a comprehensive repair program will be undertaken at existing fire stations island-wide.
The repair that was started under the member from Southwest at Spanish Town is in the final phase. We are spending, and I want you to listen to this, we're spending $53.7 million on the Frankfield Fire Station. Yes. We're spending $10 million on the Falmouth Fire Station. Yes. And we're spending, Mr. Speaker, an additional $10 million thanks to the Tourism Enhancement Fund to provide work to upgrade the Negril Fire Station, Mr. Speaker.
Now, opposition spokesman on technology Julian Robinson is calling for the establishment of a task force to examine the state of the Universal Service Fund, USF. During his sectoral presentation in the House of Representatives on Tuesday, Mr. Robinson said over the last 4 fiscal years, the fund's revenues have fallen by more than 57% from $1.5 billion in 2015-16 to $675 million in 2018-19. He further noted that the USF is also spending more than it is earning. He also warned that the declining revenues coming into the fund threatens its existence, and as a result, the USF may totally dry up in another 5 years. He believes that a task force will provide a crucial answer on the future of the USF.
2, in what ways have the ICT needs of the population changed over the last 14 years? And is the USF the best vehicle through which these needs should be met? 3rd, does the focus of the USF need to change in order to reflect the current and future needs of the nation's underserved communities? 4, given the current income trajectory of the fund, what are the revenue projections for the next 5 years? And finally, what are the possible alternatives for revenue generation available to continue the viability of the fund? Mr. Speaker, the end result we are trying to arrive at is simple. We need to make an informed determination around whether the purpose for which USF was initially created has been met.
The Universal Service Fund earns revenue from a levy imposed on international calls terminating on local networks. The nosedive in revenue is primarily due to a decline in voice calls. We go down to news in sports. CASAFA Super League champions Malines United will look to make it 2 from 2 in the JFF Premier League playoffs when they take on leaders Wadada at the Constant Spring Sports Complex today. Malines won their opening game against Baptiste Alliance, but will challenge the Western Confed finalists Wadada, who had a win and a draw in their first 2 games. Meanwhile, at the Wembley Centre of Excellence, Ver United of Clarendon, who also have 4 points, will take on Western Confed champions Falkland, who won their opening game on Sunday. And Lime Hall of St. Anne hosts Baptiste Alliance of St. Thomas at Drax Hall. Both have yet to register a win so far. All matches kick off at 3:30 p.m. The top 2 teams from the playoffs will qualify for the 2019-20 season of the Red Stripe Premier League. The Jamaica Tallawahs will host the St. Lucia Stars in their first home game of the Caribbean Premier League for 2019 on Thursday, September 12. The organizers of the league confirmed the fixture list on Tuesday, which will see the Tallawahs welcoming the other 5 teams in the competition to Sabina Park. The Tallawahs will also be at Sabina Park on Friday, September 13 against defending champions, the Trinbago Knight Riders. Jamaica's only weekend home game this season will be on Sunday, September 15 against the Barbados Tridents. On the 18th and 19th, the Tallawahs will play the Amazon Warriors and the Patriots respectively. Since the inception of the Caribbean Premier League in 2013, the Tallawahs have won 15 of their 20 games at Sabina Park. The first game of the season for the Tallawahs will be on September 6 against the Knight Riders at the Queen's Park Oval. The playoffs begin on October 6, while the final is set for the 12th. And that wraps up the Midday News. I'm Herman Green. Please join us at 7 for the Primetime News Package. On behalf of the news, sports, and production teams, good afternoon.